Today we're going to chat about 10 different ways that can save you a whole bunch of money from the Depression era. We're going to chat about some of those ideas. If you use them today, let me know in the comments section down below. So let's figure out ways to save money. You know, back in the day, folks didn't just run out and buy something new every time they needed it. They learned to make do with what they had. My grandmother, she had this old tomato sieve that she used for everything. Straining sauces, sifting flour, you name it. It was a little rusty, but it worked like a charm. And you know what? It taught me that you don't always need the latest gadgets and gizmos to get things done. Sometimes the simplest tools are the best tools. So before you click add to cart on that shiny new kitchen appliance, take a look around your house. You might be surprised at what treasures you already have. It's about being content with what you have and finding creative ways to use it. Fixing something that's broken or finding a new use for something you already own is satisfying. And it's a whole lot easier on the wallet, too. So next time you're tempted to buy something new, take a minute to think about how you can make do with what you have. Now, y'all know I love to cook. There's just something so satisfying about whipping up a delicious meal from scratch. And let me tell you, cooking from scratch is not only good for the soul, but it's also good for the wallet. Back in the Depression era, folks didn't have the luxury of pre-packaged meals and takeout. They had to make do with what they had, and that meant cooking everything from scratch. And you know what? Those meals were probably a whole lot healthier than the processed food we eat today. One of my favorite things to make from scratch is gravy. Plus, when you cook from scratch, you can control the ingredients, which means you can avoid things like added sugar, preservatives, and unhealthy fats. You will maintain your body, and you will save a lot of money. It's not only cheaper, but it's also more rewarding. So put on your aprons, y'all, and let's get cooking. Now let's talk about stocking your pantry. Back in the Depression era, folks knew the importance of having a well-stocked pantry. They couldn't just run to the store every time they ran out of something. They had to make sure they had enough food on hand to last them through tough times. And you know what? That's still good advice today. Having a well-stocked pantry doesn't mean you have to hoard food or go overboard. It's about having the essentials on hand so you can whip up a meal without having to run to the store every 5 minutes. Focus on stocking up on real, long-lasting foods like grains, beans, and legumes. These are the building blocks of a healthy diet, and they can last for months or even years if stored properly. Think rice, beans, lentils, oats, flour, sugar, salt, and spices. These are all things that have a long shelf life and can be used in a variety of dishes, and steer clear of those processed, packaged foods. Not only are they bad for your health, but they also don't last very long. Having a well-stocked pantry is like having a safety net. It gives you peace of mind knowing that you have food on hand no matter what. You know, back in the Depression era, victory gardens were all the rage. Folks would plant gardens in their backyards, front yards, even on rooftops. They knew that growing their own food was a great way to save money and ensure they had fresh produce on hand. And you know what? It's just as relevant today as it was back then. Now I know what you might be thinking. I live in a tiny apartment. There's no way I can have a garden. But listen, you don't need a sprawling backyard to grow your own food. You can grow herbs in pots on your windowsill, tomatoes in hanging baskets, or even lettuce in a sunny corner of your living room. Growing your own food is not only good for your wallet and your health, but it's also good for the soul. There's just something so satisfying about watching a tiny seed sprout into a plant and then being able to harvest it and enjoy the fruits of your labor. So don't let a lack of space deter you. Get creative and find ways to incorporate a little bit of green into your life. I love to can and preserve food. There's just something so satisfying about putting up a batch of homemade jam or pickling some fresh cucumbers. And let me tell you, preserving your own food is not only a great way to save money, but it's also a great way to enjoy the flavors of summer all year round. Back in the Depression era, folks knew how to make the most of their harvest. They'd can fruits and vegetables, pickle cucumbers and beans, and make jams and jellies to enjoy throughout the year. And you know what? It's a tradition that's worth bringing back. Canning might seem intimidating at first, but it's really not that difficult. There are tons of resources available online and in libraries that can teach you the basics. And once you get the hang of it, you'll be canning like a pro in no time. But canning's not the only way to preserve food. You can also dehydrate fruits and vegetables, freeze leftovers, and even make your own jerky. I love to repurpose and reuse things. It's one of my favorite things to do. And let me tell you, back in the Depression era, folks were masters of reuse. They didn't just throw something away because it was empty or worn out. They found ways to give it new life. And you know what? That's a lesson we could all learn from today. We live in a world where it's so easy to just throw things away. But before you toss that empty jar or that old t-shirt in the trash, take a minute to think about how you could reuse it. I save glass jars like they're going out of style. They're great for storing leftovers, homemade salad dressings, or even overnight oats. And don't even get me started on old t-shirts. They make the best cleaning rags. So next time you're about to throw something away, take a second look. I love a clean house. But let me tell you, cleaning supplies can get expensive. Back in the Depression era, folks didn't have the luxury of fancy store-bought cleaners. They had to make do with what they had, and that meant using simple, natural ingredients to keep their homes clean. And you know what? Those simple ingredients worked like a charm, and they're still just as effective today. One of my favorite DIY cleaners is a simple mixture of vinegar and water. It's a natural disinfectant, and it works wonders on everything from countertops to windows. And for tougher messes, you can't go wrong with baking soda. It's a natural abrasive that can power through grease and grime. Plus, it's a natural deodorizer. So it's great for freshening up carpets and upholstery. So ditch those expensive chemical-laden cleaners and embrace the power of simple, natural ingredients. Now, I know rationing might sound like something out of a history book, but it's a concept that's still relevant today. Back in the Depression era, folks had to make do with less. They rationed everything from food to gasoline to clothing. It was a way to stretch their resources and make sure everyone had enough. And you know what? We can learn a lot from their example. Now, I'm not saying we need to go full-on Depression-era rationing, but there are ways we can be more mindful of our consumption and make sure we're not wasting precious resources. Take gasoline, for example. With gas prices being what they are these days, it's more important than ever to be mindful of our driving habits. Rationing isn't about depriving yourself. It's about being mindful of your consumption and making conscious choices about how you use resources. I love a good bargain. But sometimes the best things in life are free, or at least, they don't have to cost an arm and a leg. Back in the Depression era, folks couldn't always afford to buy what they needed, so they bartered and traded. It was a way to get the goods and services they needed without having to spend money. And you know what? It's a tradition that's making a comeback. Bartering and trading is a great way to get rid of things you don't need or use anymore and get something you need in return. Plus, it's a great way to connect with your community and build relationships with your neighbors. One of my favorite ways to barter and trade is through online platforms. So next time you need something, don't automatically reach for your wallet. See if you can barter or trade for it instead. You know, back in the Depression era, folks had to rely on each other to get by. They formed strong community networks, sharing resources, skills, and support. And you know what? In today's world, building strong community networks is more important than ever. When we connect with our neighbors, support local businesses, and share our skills and resources, we create a more resilient and sustainable way of life. Start by getting to know your neighbors. You never know who might have skills or resources that you could benefit from, and vice versa. Supporting local businesses is another great way to build community. Building strong community networks is about recognizing that we're all in this together. Well, that's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed these 10 Depression-era habits that can save you big bucks. These habits emphasize resilience and resourcefulness. It's not about living in the past. It's about taking inspiration from those who came before us and finding ways to apply their wisdom to our modern lives. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tips on living a frugal and sustainable life.